Let me give you a little information about the Hoover Institution. It's one of the nation's leading research centers with a mission dedicated to producing policy ideas that promote economic prosperity, national security, and democratic governance. Capital Conversations, the series you've joined today, invites policymakers to participate in a dialogue about some of the most pressing issues of today with Hoover Fellows. Today, we are partnering with Assita Kanko to discuss lessons learned, European values versus Islamism. Let's get started. Assita is currently a Belgian member of the European Parliament. She was elected in 2019 to the new Flemish Alliance and is a member of the Parliament's delegation for EU-US relations. She serves on the following committees: Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, Foreign Affairs, Human Rights, and the Security and Defense Committee. As a politician, her work has led to the adoption of the Parliament's first ever resolution entirely focused on ending the practice of female genital mutilation. And just to give you some perspective, there are at this point 600,000 survivors of female genital mutilation in the EU, and there are 180,000 girls at risk in 13 different countries in Europe. Assita herself is a survivor of this heinous practice. She comes from Burkina Faso, and that's where it was inflicted upon her. Assita, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ayaan. I'm very moved and proud to be live with you right now. You went yourself also through a lot, including female genital mutilation, and look at you, you are one of the strongest women I can also look up to. And so Ayaan is a research fellow at the Hoover Institution, primarily focusing her research on Islamism. She has been called by a newspaper in Europe one of the modern times Voltaire. And I can say I can understand why. You founded a foundation, the AHER Foundation, to defend women's rights, women and girls' rights, to raise funds to protect them against honor violence, and also support the advancements for freedom of speech, also support the work of Muslim reformers. You've published several books on emancipation and self-determination. And in the past, Ayaan also served in the Dutch Parliament from 2003 to 2006. But above all, to me, Ayaan is a fighter. You are a poet of words. You are actually not only speaking about freedom, but also implementing it every day in your life. Today, I'm happy to speak to you. And I would like to share this quote that also summarizes what you represent to me and to many Muslim and former Muslim women, or women who are not even religious either. You said in one of your books, some girls comply, others lead a double life. Some run away and fall victim to prostitution and drugs. A few make their way on their own, as I did, and may even reconcile with their families. So you have done this way that many women still need to do. And this is why we're having this conversation today. Thank you for joining me. En aan iedereen in Vlaanderen, welkom in dit gesprek met Ayaan Hirsi Ali en maak je vragen maar klaar.
Assita, thank you very much for those kind words. I really look forward to, I feel honored and privileged to have this conversation with you and to bring you to our Hoover Institution community. I think one of the questions that many of us here on this side of the Atlantic have is, what is happening in Europe? We've been looking at the attacks in France, in Austria, in Germany. And you are a member of the European Parliament. Could you please give us just some idea of what is happening when it comes to the confrontation in Europe between the Islamist ideology, those who spread it and those who abide by it, and the European norms, values, and laws?
So I think what we are witnessing here in Europe did not start now. And it's just reminding us that there is a problem that remain unsolved in society. There is a group of young people who are turning against society, as some are just people who just arrived, who have been granted asylum, who are actually trying to find a way here, and then they turn against that, like the one who killed Samuel Paty in France. Some are people who were born here, who grew up here. And I think one of the key problems are related to what is happening in their homes. Just like having dreams and wanting to contribute positively to society can be something that is encouraged at home at the dinner table. It can also be a place where people are not planning anything about their own lives, and what is remaining is actually a life without rules, where they don't care about anything. So each time there is a terrorist that is arrested, they will say the person had a problematic relationship with the police or with rule of law, etc. So the problem is linked, in my opinion, and what I've been able to observe, to a difficulty with integration of migrants population. And this is a huge challenge. To me, it's not that difficult to get integrated in a country here, like in Belgium, for example. You just need to learn the language, you need to contribute positively in society, you need to become part of the community around yourself, and you need to know that women and men are equal. You need to know that your religion or your tradition can never be above the laws of your new country, that we have rights, but we also do have obligations, and that everyone have the same obligations and the same rights. But the problem is that some will choose only the rights and will not take the obligations, and this is what is happening. And the response politically is usually always the same. So it brings me to one question I want to ask you as well, if I may, Ayaan. In what happened on the first page of your book, I'm trying to open the Kindle here to get to the quote. On your book, Infidel, you described what happened to one of your friends in the Netherlands, but I'll come back to it when I have the pop-up here, because I'm looking for the text on it. Now, the reason why we're having this conversation is also to discuss together how we need to fix this problem. And the integration issue is very serious. You mentioned in your book also there is a problem about the racism of low expectation. So instead of expecting people to comply to our laws, with our laws, there is an expectation for them to actually be pushed to violate them and continue doing so. We've seen people in Brussels who beat up policemen. Imagine if you and I would go and do that, that would really not be accepted. But why is there tolerance of some intolerance? So all of this is an issue. And I've read in the paper today that in one of our cities, when people go and apply for a job, when you have the same level of results, those who have a migrant background will be granted the job much faster, which is also, again, thing that we can't learn the language. And this is quite frustrating, but it's part of all the global set of things that prevent migrants from integrating and lead us to problems of attacks. What we need to do, I think, from the European Parliament as well, I said that, is to cut off the tap so that dirty money is not financing terrorism anymore, to have better migration policies, to have proper integration policies, to have the rule of law applicable to everyone, to not tolerate intolerance, and to also refuse the fact that Muslim women are actually dominated in their homes and in their neighborhoods and kept aside of society, refusing also parallel communities to rise, like we have Sharia courts also in the UK, for example.
Assita, you illustrate with your own life, having been born and raised in Burkina Faso, coming to Belgium, and not only learning to speak French, but also Flemish. And I want to also say your English is excellent. Really, I mean, that is just fantastic. And this takes me back to your comment about the racism of low expectations. There is, and in the time that I lived in Europe, there was a sense that individuals and families who came from countries like yours and mine, the Middle East, South Asia, that they were to be treated differently, that they were regarded differently. They were cut some slack. And a lot of the time, the arguments used were arguments of compassion. But you and I know that sometimes, and I think it's unintended, I want to be charitable, that these arguments of compassion actually lead to what the current president of France now calls a parallel society or a separatist society, in which case communities from Muslim majority countries find themselves in pockets of Europe where they have very little access to education and to jobs, and the radical Muslims come in and take advantage of them. Are you seeing any changes there? And I say this because for the last 20 years, some of the things I witnessed in the Netherlands was, in school, for instance, history classes would be taught, and part of any history class in Europe, as you know, is the Holocaust. And some of the parents would come in and object to that, and the officials would, just to make peace with the parents and some of the kids, not all of the kids, would say, well, then let's not have these courses. That is the racism of law expectations. If they bothered to say, we don't want to take this class, we're not interested in the language class, we want to have classes and courses in our own languages, all of that would be granted. That is racism of law expectations. Has anything changed in the last 20 years? Are there some European countries that are doing better than others? Please give us an idea of what's going on.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're bringing this up, because this racism or law expectation is much deeper than we can imagine. And I don't feel there is a change. Perhaps the only thing that has changed is that we are now having this conversation more often. But people like yourself have put it on the agenda and make it less taboo. But still, it remains a very complicated conversation to have. Like when I had this conversation recently also on social media, I have received mails of people telling me to stop speaking about this. But when we don't allow children to learn and to develop their own critical mind, they are surrounding before they even start. And this is killing whatever the process of enlightenment brought to us. So when the thing that showed me that that we didn't notice any change since Theo van Gogh has been killed is when reading the first page of your book, Infidel. And I will quote that page here, and I will recommend everyone to read that book again. So you say, one November morning in 2004, Theo van Gogh got up to go to work at his film production company in Amsterdam. He took out his old black bicycle and headed down a main road. Waiting in a doorway was a Moroccan man with a handgun and 2 butcher knives. As Theo cycled down the Linneaustraat, Mohamed Bouyeri approached. He pulled out his gun and shot Theo several times. Theo fell off his bike and lurched across the road, then collapsed. Bouyeri followed. Theo begged, "Can't we talk about this?" But Bouyeri shot him 4 more times. Then he took out one of his butcher knives and sawed into Theo's throat. With the other knife, he stabbed a 5-page letter onto Theo's chest. That letter was addressed to you to make you shut up. You didn't. So you continued serving freedom, which is also coming with high cost. We'll speak about that later. What I want to ask you now is 2 things. How does this make you feel to think back of that, what happened? And how did you feel when you saw in the news what happened to Samuel Paty in France? And I'm sorry to bring this story up because I know it's very deeply painful, and one of the many pains that one suffered to pay for freedom.
Assita, of course, you know that is a very, very painful page in life. But the point I wanted to make, and I was making in describing that horrible incident, is that Mohamed Bouyeri who killed Theo van Gogh was radicalized. He was introduced to radical Islam in Holland. And that his family, let's start there, members of his family, members of his community were very much aware of this. And if we go beyond that, the schools were aware of it. The government was aware of it. The media were aware of it. And it's the same case in the case of the murder of Samuel Paty. The radicalization process, this process of brainwashing is all around us. And that's what I wanted to point out, is where when you have a competing set of values and norms, and the values and norms of the murderer of Theo van Gogh and the murderer of Samuel Paty is, if you blaspheme against the Prophet of Muhammad, if you blaspheme against my religion, then I'm going to apply the laws of my religion, which is to decapitate, which is to kill, which is to punish, which is to silence. And it is some of these European communities, from the family to the neighborhood, that have in many ways either endorsed it, encouraged it, ignored it, or have been complacent. Assita, I know that quite recently you were very vocal about the role of women in the radicalization process. Could you speak to that, please?
Yeah, I think the role of women, Ayaan, thank you for that, is quite underestimated in the process of radicalization. And it's also underestimated in the process of emancipation. By letting Muslim women down and not making them integrate, we are letting go of an opportunity to emancipate entire communities, because one woman who is free has such a huge impact around her. And by underestimating what they're doing, we are actually forgetting details that are not very tiny, like the segregation in the schools between boys and girls. Women are participating a lot to that. When we look at how many Europeans went to Syria and women who followed them to go there and raise their kids a particular way, and also actually ill-treat other women, when what they did in the camps in Syria is completely awful. So the participation of women in the education process and also their passiveness is teaching their own sons that when they go outside in the street, they need to treat other women the same way. Like, you don't need to respect them, and you don't need to obey, or you don't need to comply with any rules that is actually showing that they are actually equal to you. So there is a double system in there. And besides, they will not be able to earn their own money at the end or fight for their own freedom. And the problem is, it just keeps continuing. There is a dilemma imposed to these women. And what we all notice is that when you choose for freedom, and you've experienced it yourself as well, I experienced myself as well, is that you kind of end up breaking up with your family. It's forced you to do or break up with your family or choose for freedom. And what is that freedom? It's like having wearing clothes like you and I we are wearing right now, not hiding your face and your body behind anything. It's seeing your body as something that belongs to you, not something that represents the honor of anyone else, and choosing your own husband, deciding how many kids you want to have, and deciding who you want to talk to in the street. These are very, very basic things, but many women in European neighborhoods still do not have this kind of freedom.
And my American women, I'm a mother now, and so are you. And my American female friends ask me, how on earth can a mother be involved in sending her son, her own child, to join an outfit like the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria? How is it possible that she knows that her son is going to arm himself, kill other people, and in the process get killed himself? What are these mothers saying to their children, and why are they covering it up? What is going on?
This is a very good question. And I'm wondering what your answer was to her, because you also went through that process where you have one tried as a kid to indoctrinate people like you as well. But through education, you reach another point. I remember you writing that you were one of the kids who thought that Salman Rushdie was deserving what was happening, but yet at the end, you understood the process of enlightenment and you changed. So I think that that process, I would like you to explain that process and say how we can use that process today, because right now we need to believe in integration, that the fact that people can actually leave something that is being taught to them, develop their critical mind, and you are a living proof of that as well. As mothers, no way I'm going to perpetrate female genital mutilation to my kid or send her to any place just because I know it's useless, and we know much better right now. We are not going to do that. But perhaps these mothers are just obeying their community, they're obeying the men of the community. Most religious rules are made by men and opposed to women, actually. So they're obeying all this, and they perhaps just believe that they're building a new life for them after their life on earth, because everything on earth can be sacrificed for wine in the paradise, although you can just go to the corner shop and buy some wine. So I think it's so much deep. Sometimes they don't have any choice. They really do believe in that. And other times they're just complying with the domination of the community. And maybe they don't want to let the kids go there. Maybe they're just not daring to say no. Some of them also, I saw in the Netherlands and in Belgium, in European countries, send their daughters, underage daughters, to get married in Ethiopia, in Somalia, in any place, or to get cut abroad in Uganda, in Senegal. This involves the participation of the whole community. But how would you advise, or how would you be your point on how to bring these women to participate to something different, to actually choose other dreams for the kids, to matter around the dinner table?
Assita, I have, just like you, gone through a very long, what I call an emancipation process, where the emancipation I'm talking about is not an emancipation from government, but it is an emancipation from your own family, from your own religion and your own God. And when I lived in the Netherlands and here in America and in different parts of Europe, I've come across thousands of women who are born into these families and who do really want to emancipate themselves. And very often I found that, you know, when they do get the courage to stand up to the imam, to the father, to the brother, to the cousin, that they are then confronted with a type of violence that is quite strange to Europeans and other Westerners. They are literally threatened with decapitation. They're beaten to pulp. When I was in Holland, domestic violence was, of course, it was a national issue. All women were subjected and could tell a story of some kind of domestic violence. But when you looked at the women's shelters, it was interesting to have the smallest percentage of the population filling up, taking up the largest number of places in women's shelters. And so I think that in many ways, you're absolutely right when you say, when it comes to the process of integration or assimilation, as we call it here, women do take the first steps, but they're let down. They're let down. And at this point, I want to say we are getting close to, it is 12:25 where I am. And I want to say to our audience, Assita, I want to say to our audience, if you are just joining us, my name is Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and this is Hoover's Capital Conversations with Assita Kanko, who is a member of the European Parliament. We will take questions shortly. Please submit yours at the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question and you are on Zoom, you can submit it at the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. If you're watching on Facebook, you can submit questions in the comments section under live video. Chantal asks, what are the factors that make radicals susceptible to brainwashing? Is there a stereotypical profile that make individuals easy targets for radicalism? I ask this question as it may point us to the kind of situations and behaviors one can manage or prevent to deter this brainwashing. Assita, would you like to go first?
No, I will let you go first, but maybe we can take a second question together with this one. What do you think? I could just add this one that we got here.
I think I
Or
can.
you want to answer this one first?
Yeah, I mean, I can say to Chantal, it's not just one thing; it's a number of things. Yes, there is the imam or the mosque or the organization that is dedicated to advancing the radical Islamist ideas. They do target vulnerable immigrant communities, especially boys or their children. They get a lot of money from foreign governments. Right now, there is a confrontation, I don't know if you're following it, between the government of Turkey and the government of France, where I hope that the government of France is going to stand up to the government of Turkey and say, we don't want your money, we don't want you coming to radicalize our children. And then I think deep down, and here's where it really becomes sensitive, is, you know, you can be a believer in the Islamic faith without being radical. But if you then don't stand up to the radical wing, you make it very easy for the radicals with an agenda to take on the vulnerable and absorb as much power as they can. They take over institutions such as mosques, Muslim centers, and that is, if you ask me what should we do to deter that, then I would say we have to look into these institutions one by one. We have to say we're going to educate French children in France, Belgian children in Belgium, American children in American, and then we have to advance our values. And the most important thing to deter any kind of radicalism, whether it is Islamist or something else, is to teach young minds critical thinking. And that the whole concept of critical thinking is right before our eyes. That is threatened and that is challenged in America, in Europe, everywhere. Assita, would you like to add something to that? And then we'll take the next.
I totally agree with you. I think the reason why people are trying to cut off the voice of people who are teaching our children how to be able to think critically is clear. They know that the most dangerous thing for their faith is the education, the proper education that we're giving our children. And also by being so violent is to scare them off and teach them how to be afraid before they even start thinking. So this is what we need to continue doing. I believe in the power of education in that. Like we are also the living evidence of what education can do, and teach you to not accept the domination of those who want to dominate you as an individual, and that freedom of thought is for everyone. But we need to have the courage to not only use words, but to also take action. And this is, you rightly point out the situation between France and Turkey. I also called in the European Parliament for all European countries to support Macron, to answer the call from Macron. Secondly, Macron doesn't only need to say all these things. What he's saying needs to be also translated in the way in which he's doing his foreign policy. And Europe need to tell Turkey now, look, we actually have our own voice and we're not going to accept the behavior of Erdogan, the way in which some radical cultural centers are financed illegally here around our cities. We're not going to accept that. But so far, I haven't seen a very brave Europe trying to really tell Erdogan what they think. Instead, they even gave more than 3 billion euros to Turkey between 2014 and 2019, as if Turkey is going to become a member of the European Union without adhering to our values. But that's another topic. In fact, we need to also implement what we're standing for and have the courage to defend our own values, which we are not doing right now. And in France, also throughout Europe, we need to protect people who are threatened because of the fact that they're using their freedom, actually, that they get threatened by people who want them to shut up. This is also not acceptable. And if we don't do anything for them, we can't pretend that we're actually fighting radical Islam. So these are all also fighting terrorism content online, also issues that need to be addressed. We're working on that in the European Parliament. I would like to ask you the question that I got also inside here from Lutgarde, een vraag van Lutgarde. She first says, my sincere thanks to Ayaan for constantly being a beacon of light in these troubled times. This is just a good compliment to share. And her question is, should we ask that Muslims reject Sharia completely? And can they still call themselves Muslims if they reject Sharia completely?
I think that's a very, very good question. And by the way, thank you for the compliment. I wrote a book called Heretic. It was published in the year 2015, and it addresses that question. And it is about trying to make a distinction between different sets of Muslims, but acknowledging that there is one Islam, and that one Islam has not been modified. And every time over 1400 years, when attempts were made to modify, adapt, and modernize, then those were met with counter efforts to take everything back to what is pure and what is pristine. To the simple question, should Muslims reject Sharia law? My answer to that question is yes. If they do not reject Sharia law, it's going to be very difficult for a Muslim individual to adapt to a country like Belgium or the United States or any other part of Europe where there are secular laws, because Sharia says there is only holy law, only the law of God. And laws and rules and norms that derived from Sharia, as we've seen time and time again, are in conflict with man-made laws. So the shortest answer possible is to say, yes, if you are a Muslim, you can be a Muslim on a spiritual level, pray, fast, go to Mecca, and have your rituals according to your religious convictions. But you cannot substitute secular man-made law for holy law. It's just not going to work. It's going to lead to conflicts, as we are seeing over and over again, not only unfold in Europe, but also even unfold in nation states that are Muslim majority. Assita, I think the next question is coming in. We have to keep this thing going, and it is from Mitchell. And Mitchell wants to know, do you think that these concerns, though not entirely absent here, have been less of a problem in America than in Europe? If so, why do you think the United States has not faced these concerns to this degree? It's a very common question I get these days, which is Europe is going down the drain. You know, they are facing these issues, but we are in America, we're different. Assita, would you like me to take that, or would you like to?
I think you can take that. Before you do, I would like to tell our Dutch audience what the title of your book you mentioned is in Dutch. Dat is dus het boek Ketters, en dat gaat over de hervorming van de islam. So with this, we can go to the question. Thank you for answering, Ayaan.
So the question, Mitchell, if I can just really summarize it, is that is this something that is uniquely Europe? Yes, of course, the continent of Europe has some proximity to Muslim majority countries, and they have large populations, per capita from Muslim majority countries, and they have had a history of colonialism, where, for instance, in the example of France, there are many, many immigrants and their children and their grandchildren from places like Algeria and Tunisia and so on. But I think it would be a mistake, it would be naive to say that we don't have similar developments here in the United States. Remember, we were hit in September 11, 2001, by Islamist terrorists, and ever since we've had a number of attacks. I think the big mistake we make in America, and they've made it in Europe as well, is that we then focus on the violent aspects of Islam and we overlook the radicalization process, the indoctrination process, what I call dawah, or actually that's what they call it. And I think that we have that here in the United States of America. We have communities that are incubated and isolated from the rest of society. But what is going on in these communities inside the United States of America is not as manifest, and it's not as terrifying as things are now in Europe. But there's no reason for complacency.
I would like to ask you the next question, which is from Sabine. Sabine say, many say the Muslim population in Europe will increase by 2050. Many people are concerned about this. How do you think we should respond to this with respect to commentators speaking of Islamophobia?
Assita, would you like to take that question?
Well, I will take part of it, but I'm sure you have also comments on that. I think it's not, I believe that integration is possible, you know, and if we don't succeed in integrating the populations, migrant population that we have right now, it's only feeding two things. It's feeding far right, it's feeding radicalism, and you know, it's feeding far right and far left together, and it's feeding radicalism. And this is not, this is not going to lead to solutions because radicalism will always feed the violence, and we just keep continuing. You mentioned the 9/11 attacks. It was some time ago. I mean, I was like even not imagining myself being a mother yet, and right now I'm 40 and I don't see any difference the past 20 years. So I think we're just staying in the same repetition of things and expecting different results. So whether the population is low or high, we need to integrate them. If we don't succeed in that integration, it's not going to work. Regarding the future, of course, we need to have manageable migration policy. Of course, you need to be able to process the policy that you're having, and you need to believe that when you teach the right thing to people on the right way, they can actually learn. And to teach them is not only education at school, it's also to teach them that they need to respect the laws. If someone commits a crime, they need to follow to feel the consequences. But when you are actually losing society who doesn't impose rule of law, then you can't actually educate people to respect rules, to know that we're actually here and the Sharia law or whatever is not going to be implemented. And I would just be very blunt and say, when you really actually want Sharia, why do you come to Europe? There are plenty of places where Sharia does exist. You can just go there.
Exactly. And I think I just want to add to what you said. The subject of today's conversation is European values versus Islamism. And Islamists are promoting a value system and an agenda, and they're very aggressive about it. And if the Europeans do not promote their values with the same vigor, then we know that from human tradition and human history, and even animal relationships, that those who are more forceful and more aggressive win the day. So my advice to Europeans would be to promote their values if they remember what they were, to promote their values with just as much vigor, if not more, as the Islamists are doing. And that is then takes me in this short time to asking the next question. This is a question from Dennis. Is it Dennis or Denise? I think the reason why I ask that question is because it comes with one N, but no E at the end. So Dennis or Denise, what is the rationalization for mutilating girls?
Can you repeat that, Ayaan?
What is the rationalization for mutilating girls? What is the rationalization for female genital mutilation? Probably came from a Dennis.
That's a challenging one. It's also a good one. It's I don't think there is even a rational behavior behind this. You know, it's just a process of
There is in Somalia, but I think you might have a different story to tell from Burkina Faso and West Africa. In Somalia, they cut the genitals of the girl child so that when she gets to puberty, she has her sexual libido is suppressed. And the second reason, very rational also, is they want to be very sure that when she gets married, you're not allowed to have sex before marriage. And on your wedding night, your husband and your family want to be assured that you're a virgin. And so that is the reason why they do it. That's the rationalization for it. What is it in Burkina Faso?
It's exactly the same reasons. I think maybe we're arguing about the word rationalize, being rational.
Rational.
Because, yes, I think that was maybe the difference. That I would say like someone who is rational is maybe someone who is actually thinking about things on a way that is not nonsense. But you know what they do is exactly the same. They do. It's actually to dominate the woman that you will become. But they dominate you already when you are still a child. They want you to stay virgin. They want you to not have sexual desire. They want you to just wait. It's a huge attack on your self-esteem and on the potential that you have to respect yourself and to actually impose yourself as a person, as an individual in society. It's stopping your self-determination. And this is how you grow up, and then you need to rebuild that self-esteem. You become very easy to dominate. So I think everyone who survived this and also rebuild their self-esteem, also including yourself, Ayaan, really went to a very, very long way. We won't have a lot of time to go into details here, I think, but in Ayaan's book, Infidel, called in Dutch Mijn Vrijheid, but also in my book, Because You Are a Girl, in Dutch, Omdat Je Meisje Bent, you will get much more details. But it's the same reasons, the same process, and 200 million victims worldwide who actually had to survive not only the cutting, but also what it did to them as a person. And a lifetime. I'm always shocked that this still exists, of course, and that we really need to fight it.
Assita, it is almost quarter to 9 p.m. for you in Brussels. I know it's very late. I also want to say we have at least 21 questions open in the chat, lots of questions. So I'm delighted with this. Please, let's do it again. I'm going to say this is all we have time for today. It was a great conversation. I hope that our audience today haven't been shocked and
I think they will stay in touch with us.
By some of the issues that we've been discussing. I want to say, Assita, please give your closing remarks.
I would like to say it's just, there are so many things we could have discussed, but we can't, of course, have this all here. But I hope you will be able to come to Europe in the spring when you come to present your new book. I'm inviting you in the European Parliament to come and present your new book about integration, Pray. So I'm inviting everyone to pre-order it as soon as it's possible. And I will invite Ayaan to come and present it here. And you're all welcome. So please stay in touch and come and enjoy it. I think we'll have more time also to discuss at that time. And in the meantime, everyone can contact us online and continue to send us their questions. We continue working for change.
Assita, thank you very much. That is hoping that in the year 2021, that COVID-19 will be behind us, that we'll have the vaccination. I'll be able to travel and talk about my book, Pray, Immigration, Islam, and the erosion of the rights of women, not just Muslim women, but all women in Europe. You can learn, I would say, about what we did today. You can learn about this series at hoover.org/Capital Conversations. Capital Conversations was what we had today, and thank you for joining us. And I hope you'll tune in next time. Thank you.
I will just thank our Dutch speaking audience as well. Dank iedereen om mee te hebben geluisterd. Aarzel niet om vragen door te sturen. I think everyone and many told me, Ayaan, they miss you a lot in Europe. So whenever you want to come back and stay, you're welcome.
Thank you. Take a lot of security. Bye, Assita.
Bye.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you for doing this with me. And thank you to the Hoover team, of course.